What if the most expensive part of innovation is not picking the wrong startup, but mistaking a great demo for a real business?
That lands a little hard because it sounds exactly like how a lot of teams get pulled in.
It does. This discussion is built around a document called Two Reliable Paths to Startup Innovation, Curated Portfolios, and Independent Frameworks. Its whole point is that retail innovation teams are not short on ideas. They are short on a reliable way to judge which startups can actually survive enterprise reality. And by the end, the big shift is pretty clear. Startup selection is not mainly about spotting shiny tech and then throwing it into a pilot. It is about structured evaluation before the expensive part starts.
So this is less who has the coolest pitch and more who can still function after the pitch room disappears.
Exactly. The document covers the familiar failure loop, then lays out two ways out of it. One is a curated path through Microsoft for startups Pegasus, and the other is a do it yourself path using two frameworks, ARS² and the Microsoft Well-Architected Framework.
Here's where it gets personal for anybody working in innovation. The document opens with some brutal math. Around 70,000 startups are founded every year, and about 90% fail within their first 2 years. At the same time, a lot of the capabilities retailers want right now, things like agentic AI or real time shelf intelligence, live inside those young companies. So the need is real, but the odds are rough.
Right, and that is the trap. Teams meet a startup at a trade show or through a referral, they see an impressive demo, they do a quick capability check, then they launch a proof of concept.
And months later, it stalls because the company cannot support a large customer, cannot integrate cleanly, cannot scale beyond a handful of stores, or maybe does not even have proof that the market really wants the product.
If you have ever wondered why smart teams keep repeating that loop, that is the question to hold on to for a second. The answer is not that people are careless. It is that a team of 5 or 10 people cannot do venture grade diligence on tens of thousands of startups. So selection ends up resting on demo polish and pitch quality, which tells you almost nothing about whether a solution survives contact with 1,000 real stores.
So, in plain English, the demo room rewards the wrong skill set.
Exactly. It is like test driving a concept car on a perfect private track and deciding it is ready for potholes, cargo, weather, repairs, and 600 drivers. The environment flatters the product. Real operations expose it.
And that is the aha moment. The exciting part is not the problem. The mismatch between test conditions and real conditions is the problem. So, what happens when a company wants a safer path without giving up startup innovation entirely?
That leads to Pegasus. The document describes Microsoft for Startups Pegasus as a curated portfolio built backward from enterprise demand. That detail matters. It is not just a pile of startups waiting to be discovered. The team starts with customer engagement and figures out what enterprises are actively looking for. Then it defines solution categories around actual business problems. After that, Microsoft sources candidate startups through close relationships with tier one venture capital firms.
Which means those startups have already cleared somebody else's serious diligence bar.
Yes, and then Pegasus adds another screen. It runs a propensity model to check enterprise readiness before the startup gets admitted and matched with customers. So there is demand led category selection, VC backed sourcing, and then a data driven readiness check. That layered intake is really the whole point.
And for a retailer, that changes the emotional stakes fast. You are not starting from maybe this company can pass security, maybe it can integrate, maybe it will exist next year. You are starting from a later stage company, usually beyond seed stage, often with paying customers, building on Azure, and in some cases, sellable through Azure Marketplace. That can turn a vendor onboarding process that might take most of a year into a few weeks.
Which is a huge deal because procurement delay alone kills momentum. But here's the part nobody should miss. A curated portfolio has a natural boundary. It can only show you companies inside the program. The startup world is much bigger than any one portfolio, and some of the most interesting capabilities, especially in fast moving spaces like agentic AI, may be too young or too independent to be there.
So if you only use the curated lane, you reduce risk, but you may also miss the weird early thing that turns into the category leader.
That is exactly the trade-off, which is why the document does not say pick one path. It says run two paths in parallel. Once a retailer sources a startup directly through a trade show, a referral, or its own research, the burden shifts in-house. And this is where the second path starts, not with vibes, but with frameworks.
That line alone probably saves people money.
The split is clean. ARS2 evaluates the solution itself, whether it actually works under live retail conditions. The Microsoft Well-Architected Framework evaluates the system under it, whether the engineering can survive enterprise scale, security demands, and reliability needs.
And a startup can pass one while failing the other.
Exactly. Great output on weak infrastructure or beautiful infrastructure producing bad answers.
Okay, this next part is a bit technical, but stick with us because it is worth it. ARS2 sounds simple when you first hear the four words, but the reason it matters is that each one blocks a different kind of failure. The framework comes from George Mirza, an industry veteran who worked on category management, retail analytics, and early shelf scanning robotics. The four tests are accurately, repeatedly, at scale, and with speed. Miss any one of them, and the solution is not really ready.
The restaurant analogy helps here. Imagine a new restaurant. The food has to taste right every plate. That is accuracy. It has to be consistent every night. That is repeatability. It has to hold up when the whole dining room fills. That is scale. And it has to reach the table while it is still hot. That is speed.
Right, because nobody says a restaurant works if the meal is amazing only on Tuesday or only for four customers or arrives cold.
That is exactly what ARS2 is doing to retail tech. Uh, Accuracy comes first on purpose. If a system cannot reliably identify what is on the shelf, predict demand, or resolve the case it was assigned, then everything downstream automates bad data. And the framework insists on proving accuracy in live environments, not in labs, using independent ground truth like physical shelf audits done blind to the system's output.
That blind audit detail is sneaky important. Otherwise, the vendor is grading its own homework. Then there is repeatability. One good run proves almost nothing. The solution has to perform across days, across stores, across normal messiness, and ideally through at least one planogram reset or promotional cycle.
Scale is where a lot of pilots get exposed. A pilot is controlled. Chain deployment brings fleet management, data pipeline load, variation in store formats, and a cost to serve that still has to make business sense. And speed matters because retail signals expire. And out of stock detected too late is not useful information, it is a post mortem.
So, in plain English, a solution that is accurate but slow can still lose money.
Yes. And RS2 also has a maturity curve from exploring to developing to progressing to achieving. That gives teams a more sober way to say this startup might deserve a contained pilot, but it is not a chain wide rollout candidate yet.
But here's the thing nobody expects. What if the solution really does work and you still should not deploy it?
That is where the Microsoft Well-Architected Framework comes in. It was created for cloud workloads, and it looks at technical quality through five pillars: reliability, security, cost optimization, operational excellence, and performance efficiency. A simple way to picture it is an apartment building. The lobby can look beautiful, but you still want to know whether the wiring is safe. The elevators hold under pressure, the fire exits are real, the maintenance process works, and the bills do not become absurd.
Which is the perfect contrast with the demo problem. The demo is the lobby. Enterprise deployment is everything hidden behind the walls.
Exactly. Retailers can ask a startup whether it has already completed a well-architected review and request the findings. If no review exists, the retailer's architecture team can walk the startup through the assessment questionnaire as a structured diligence interview. That surfaces things casual technical conversations often miss: disaster recovery planning, security posture, monitoring maturity, and how costs behave under load. And if an engagement is moving toward production, finishing that review can become a contractual requirement.
There is one nuance here, though. The review is a self assessment by the startup, not an audited certification. So the retailer is not pretending, it is independent proof. It is requiring the assessment, reading the results carefully, and probing weak spots.
Right. And for independently verified assurance, the document says things like SOC2 or ISO 27 times should sit alongside it. What this really means is that good architecture conversations are necessary, but not the same as audited controls.
And now the turning point from earlier really lands. ARS² tells you whether the answer is right, while Architected tells you whether the machine giving you that answer can be trusted at enterprise scale.
That distinction changes everything. The document then pulls both frameworks into a staged process. Start with ARS2 as a desk filter before any pilot. Ask for ground truth accuracy evidence, performance over time, references operating at meaningful scale, and time to action figures.
So the expensive experiment does not start until the cheap questions are answered. Then the technical gate comes next. The well-architected assessment checks whether the platform can safely enter the retailer's environment and grow inside it. Only after that does the live pilot begin.
And even the pilot gets disciplined. Sites should be chosen by the retailer, not the vendor. Success thresholds should be written down in advance. Expansion should only happen as the startup clears each ARS2 measure.
That surgeon thought experiment fits here. You would never watch a polished presentation, let somebody operate, and only afterward ask about outcomes history and safety procedures. But teams do the business version of that all the time with startups.
And one last caution, neither framework evaluates the company itself. Financial runway, team depth, customer concentration, and protections like data portability still need separate diligence. A startup can pass every product and architecture test and still run out of money halfway through deployment.
Which is such a useful ending note because it keeps the whole thing honest. There is no magic checklist, there is just much better discipline.
So the big picture is pretty clean. Retailers do not have to choose between safe incumbents and startup chaos.
They have a curated route through Pegasus where demand led sourcing and prior vetting reduce a lot of the risk. And they have a direct sourcing route where ARS² checks whether the solution works and the well architected framework checks whether it can hold up in the real world.
And if you remember where we started, the shift is this: innovation is not winning because you ran more pilots. It wins when something actually reaches production.
Which leaves one good question hanging in the air. The next time a startup demo looks amazing, are you looking at a deployable business or just a very polished lobby?
Thanks for spending time with us.